Window World is proud to present Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. Simply the best for less at windowskansascity.com.
There's really no words to express our thanks for listening to KKHI, as we have crossed over 1 million downloads in 10 months. It started as an idea for me to scratch my broadcasting itch, and I was sort of kidding myself thinking it could actually work as a business. Well, here we are, and it's all because of you. Every single listener matters to us. So do the patrons and, of course, our incredible sponsors. Hey, instead of exuberation here, it's going to surprise you to know that I was terrified of this venture, and I reached some really, really low points last year before launching it. I'll explain it fully on this podcast. Also, big thanks to my wife, Jessica, for all her support, my son, Cameron, for being my computer and tech guy, and the son you all know here, Spencer. Spencer will join us in just a few minutes. We'll even bust out some sports takes. After all, the Royals have won 5 in a row. Daniel Lynch had the best game by a Royals pitcher this year, and the Chiefs are in training camp. It's all ahead on KKHI, brought to you by Pro Partners Healthcare, online at propartnershealthcare.com. With offices in Leawood and the Northland, Direct Primary Care guarantees you fast access to your doctor 24/7, 365 for everyone in your family. You do this with your current insurance. Become a member at Pro Partners, and you're going to save money on copays, meds, trips to the ER. This will pay for itself. Dr. Troy Burns and his team of physicians have been giving great care and treatment to patients all over Kansas City for 3 decades. And you're going to love it at propartnershealthcare.com, Leawood and the Northland. Back Nine Development, TJ Vilkanskis and his team build custom homes, commercial properties, room additions, or the Solheim condominiums at Grand Mere in Manhattan on the Colbert Hills Golf Course with a resort pool, workout facility, covered parking. Check it all out online at back9development.com. 360 Document Solutions, covering Western Missouri and all of Kansas. If you have an office with copiers and printers, IT solutions, hey, if you've got that HP toner going on, you're paying too much. It is too expensive, and 360 and Mark and his team will help you bring your costs down with better products. Copiers, printers, KIP, black and white, color wide format, voice over IT solutions, mailing systems, outsourced IT. Get the complimentary analysis of your document technology at your office. Let Mark do this for you. Call him up at 913-745-5344, 360documentsolutions.com. And, of course, Mike Robinson, who was in so early as a sponsor of the podcast, and I've gotten to know pretty well over the last few months. Did not know him well before the podcast. Just a tremendous man, tremendous family, great people, work very hard. And all they want to do is treat customers fairly and do things the right way. I've experienced that as a customer now. I'm a proud owner of a Roberts Robinson Chevrolet Blazer. And like they say, we just make it easy. They did make it easy for me. And they'll do the same for you at robertsrobinson.com. These are good people. If you're in the market for a GM product, I don't care where you live. They'll get you the car. They'll get it right to you. Okay? Don't forget their award-winning service department as well. Even if it's something as simple as an oil change, they'll pick your car up for you, service it, and return it to you. They just make it easy at Roberts Robinson Chevrolet Buick GMC. Okay, we hit a milestone. Instead of exuberance, I've got that. We've exuberated all weekend. We've had fun all weekend. I'm going to tell you how it almost didn't happen on KKHI. Hit it.
Elite Automation presents Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. Make your building great again. Online at eliteautomate.com.
I sure hope your weekend was as good as the Kietzmans, who celebrated all weekend long 1 million downloads of Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. You may have heard of that by now. It was on Twitter. And I wrote the Patron podcast newsletter, and we've talked about the milestone coming up. And I want to thank all of you who have made this possible, who have listened. Some of you from day one, some of you just starting last week as the audience continues to grow each and every week. I cannot, on behalf of Jessica and myself and our whole family, I cannot thank you enough for hitting that play button every day, for supporting the sponsors of this podcast, which I could never have started it without the sponsors. And those of you that are patrons, we've got a very close bond in the patron program of the programming we do there and the newsletter that goes out each and every week. It's unbelievable. I'm gonna share a few personal things here on this podcast, as this was just going to be a little bit different than some of the others. But we'll get into some sports today as well on this pod. But I think what I want to do, because this is it obviously is a great feeling. And it is so wonderful to know that this audience is growing and people are listening and word of mouth is doing all of this. I can't get on a lot of media outlets and promote this thing. They, for whatever reason, they won't. They see it as competition now. And I get it. I get it. And I can deal with that. But the word of mouth has just been amazing and people are listening. And I hear from so many of you. And now people are coming up to me in public saying they listen to the podcast, which took several months for that to start. The most common thing people would walk up in the beginning was, what are you doing now? What's been going on, since radio? And I'd say, hey, I started a podcast. Now when people walk up, they say, I listen to your podcast. The audience really has grown that much in 10 months. But beyond just thanking you for listening, and again, the incredible sponsors, come on, seriously, the original ones, John Gillette at Window World, Gary Joslin, Ron Buck, these guys were on board before I even bought a soundboard, before I had a computer in my office, before I even knew how to do a podcast. I called the three of them up and I said, hey, if I start this podcast, would you be interested in sponsoring it? Here's what I'm thinking. And they all just immediately said, Kevin, if you're doing it, we're in. And then it grew from there. And everybody else has come on board since then. Mike Robinson, his team at Roberts Robinson are terrific. And I'm getting out over my skis. I can't really thank each and every sponsor. I'm going to mention every sponsor here in the podcast today. You'll get mentioned. You either already have, just did, or I will a little bit later on. But it's incredible the bond that we have and the likeness between the businesses of conservatives, people who are conservative and in business, the similarities that we have. And it's just a great, great feeling. And I thank you. But I want to tell you and share with you the low part. The low part in the very beginning, and if it hadn't been for the encouragement of my wife, Jessica, who did the best she possibly could to tell me that I could do this, because I literally didn't think I could. I'd never heard of anybody, that does a podcast as anything other than a hobby. There are certainly national people, Joe Rogan, those people, right? But I'm like Kansas City, like my idea for a podcast here in our little bubble of the world, from what notoriety I may have gained over 23 years on radio and 35 years in media in this community, would something local work? Would this be relevant? Can a business work? And I had a lot of doubt, but I was going to try. And the really dark part was probably the month before we started. It was getting real. I was like, I didn't know how to get the podcast onto Apple Podcasts. I didn't know how to get it onto Spotify. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have this. And we got some help from a TLC Marketing the first couple of months. Tammy and her staff over there were very instrumental in helping get this done right, because we didn't know anything about what we were doing. And I was terrified. I was not terrified of an open microphone. I was not terrified whether I could still do a monologue or host a podcast. I wasn't terrified of, am I going to get credentials to Chiefs games or get Andy Reid on I don't care. At this point, I don't care. I'll get who I can get. And if Josh Hawley's people aren't getting back to me, I'm struggling getting Josh Hawley on. I'm going to struggle to get Josh Hawley on. I can deal with that. I was never worried about that part. I didn't know if I could actually do the podcast. Like with this soundboard, with my computer rolling, I didn't understand the editing system and the program. I hadn't really edited any tape in 20 years. We had people at the radio station that did all that for me through the years. They did anytime there was a soundbite or editing of any kind, they did it all. They did everything. They played it, they edited it, they played it, everything. Now, I used to edit when I was in television. I edited videotape, and I was a fine editor, but all the technology's changed. I had to learn all of this stuff. And if you're older, like me, you may have had an experience like this. Probably once you pass about the age of 35 or 40, you start to realize that younger people are different than you. You see the kids in their 20s, and you're going, okay, that's a different generation. That's a different thing. And technology is moving so swiftly that what was cool 10 or 15 years ago isn't even relevant now. And it's unbelievable. Like, I don't like social media. I'm on there. I post the stuff on Twitter because they say, yeah, pretty much have to. There's eyeballs out there. It's good to be heard, so go do it. But I couldn't care less if I ever looked at Twitter again or got on there again in my life. Jessica handles the Facebook account for KKHI and does all that. She likes Facebook, and it's clearly cleaner and more protected there than the cesspool that is Twitter. But I was absolutely terrified. And I remember putting together the first few episodes, trying to make these edits, trying to build an open, and getting Doug Medlock's voice and, having him, send me emails of announcing Kevin Kietzman has issues, at the beginning of the podcast. And how would I edit that together and how would I put it together? And then when I did, where would it be and where would it go? What in the world is Podbean? How does this thing automatically load onto Podbean and how does it get from there to Apple Podcasts? I still don't understand any of it, folks. But I found my way through. And if you are of a certain age, maybe over 40, you probably had something pop up in your life that challenged you or came along that you didn't really want to do, that you weren't really looking for, and maybe you were terrified by it. And that was this with me. I've not told anybody this. Jessica knows this. I've not told anybody but her. I was absolutely terrified that I would not be able to do it. And I was kind of in freak out panic mode. I had worked a little bit with Todd Lebo and Ben Messner over at Sports Radio 810. I went in one day and we started practicing this editing format and stuff with them. They were helping me like, hey, you can do this. This is how it works. And it's just going whoosh, right over my head. And I have learned it. And it doesn't seem all that complicated or hard now. But if you've done something every day for 10 months, you learn it. But I hope it just gives you sort of a background or a basis for where this came from to where we are. Because it's one thing to say, hey, with 1 million downloads, beat our chest. We're all so excited. That's great. The rewarding part of the milestone for me is that I was able to get 1 download. I, honest to God, was not sure that I was going to be able to produce this thing. Absolutely terrified of the entire process of building it, editing it, posting it, publishing it. Terrifying. And we did it. So that's where my happiness comes from. I'm obviously thrilled that you listen. I can't thank you enough for hitting the like and follow button. I've started asking that really since the end of football season is all. I started that in about February. I didn't know it was that important, but it is. And we've got over 9,000 people now that get notified when a podcast is up. When I first started, I was like, boy, if I ever got 5,000 people, that'd be great. And then I said, if we get to 10, that's all. Well, heck, why stop? Is there any reason we can't have 25,000 people get notified that the podcast is up every day? Why can't we have 25,000 followers and likers of the podcast? We spread the word. We spread conservatism. And, I caught a few breaks here along the way. I know that right after the election, many conservatives tuned out a lot of media. They didn't want to see or hear anything. But it is come back in a huge way with the Biden administration being such a disheveled mess. Conservatives are really, really into this now. We are on board and we're taking stock in what do we have to do to make it work next November. That's where we all are. And I can see that with the podcast. I can see that with the growth of the listenership. And it's just amazing. I have to thank Jess because she told me that I could do this. I don't know if she believed that I could do it. I'm not computer savvy at all. I'm not good. I've told some of you when you have a technical problem and you email me, I'll try, but man, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I always recommend everybody, if you're having trouble with a podcast or a patron podcast or something like that, just go into your T-Mobile store or whatever your Verizon and have them help you. They know your phone better than I do. I am not a tech guy. I don't understand any of this stuff. So that's frustrating, but gosh darn it, she stood right by me and said, you're going to get this. It'll work. And I'm telling you, there were days that I wanted to cry. I just wanted to cry. I was terrified of this. I was terrified. It had been a year since I had worked in broadcasting. So my non-compete was then up from Union Broadcasting, and I still had not signed my buyout. A lot of frustrations going on in our lives. A lot of frustrations. We heaped a lot of it on ourselves. But we did it. We did it. And it's been, I'm telling you, this thing feels exactly like the beginning of Sports Radio 1510 then, back in 97, when we were on the smaller station before we switched in 99 to get on 810. This is kind of what it feels like. It's a grassroots, ground up venture. And it feels the same way. People really like it, and they tell me they like it, and I am just honored that people hit play every day and that they listen. I can't tell you what a kick it is to do this and to be in this format where I can talk about anything I want and then have people say, man, that's relevant. I like that you're talking about that. Because we find common ground. Like-minded people like to be around like-minded people. It's a very simple human concept. And that's working. Jessica was great. Spencer will be with us in a few minutes. He's going to join us to talk about it. He helped a lot. He's done a lot of podcasts on the weekends to kind of fill the void. I think we're going to be adding some more content this fall, probably mostly sports content, but give you more opportunities to hear more. A lot of you say, why don't you do more podcasts, or why isn't it longer, whatever. I'm okay. I think I got this format about right. Now, we've massaged it and gotten it to where it is, but I would like to have some contributors. Some other people come pod in here and see if you like them and maybe get some different angles, different takes than what I necessarily would have. Spencer's been great helping on that. He'll join us in a little bit. Cameron is my middle son, and he's been my tech guy. He wasn't here at the very beginning. So when I was learning all that, the tech stuff he's done now is he comes over, he cleans my stuff up. He's really good with computers. So he doesn't help me every day. He's not involved in producing the podcast or anything like that. Cameron's awesome. And he's helped me out there. And Doug Medlock's the voice of the podcast that you hear at the beginning and you hear at the end. And, of course, again, all the listeners, all the sponsors, all the patrons, thanks a million. No other way to say it other than thanks a million. The Royals are hot. Boy, just about the time we were just going to give up on them and say, that's it, the season's over, we're done with the Royals or whatever. They've won 5 in a row. The Royals beat Milwaukee a couple of times. Then they just swept Detroit 3 straight this weekend. Daniel Lynch was called up from Omaha. You remember how disastrous this was a few weeks ago when he was here? Well, he went 8 innings on Sunday and gave up no runs. The Royals won 5 in a row. Salvador Perez led a comeback, an epic comeback, on Saturday night with a 3-run homer. Then he had another 3-run homer on Sunday. The guy is just a stud. He's an absolute stud. And the Royals aren't great, but it is fun that they win 5 in a row, and the crowd was into it. They had fun at the ballpark this weekend. It's great to see. And it will count. I've said this. July and August count. September doesn't count as much for me. If Daniel Lynch wants to go on a tear and be really good the rest of the season, that counts. That's not some sloppy September thing you called somebody up and the other team isn't trying. That's not that. So let's see it. And Dayton Moore wants to bring these guys up. He's basically said, we're going to make some trades before July 30th. The Royals are in the market to sell. They maybe want to sell apart. Carlos Santana is not a long-term fit here. They've got his replacement at AAA Omaha right now in Nick Pratto. There are pieces in place that if they work out, it'll be great. So the Royals can deal, and they can think toward next year. And Dayton Moore said they hope to compete next year, but it all is predicated on the pitching. And this was the first really good sign this season. Daniel Lynch apparently was tipping his pitches when he was up here before. Everybody knew what was coming. I don't know how they figured that out, but they did. Word got around the league. They sent him back to Omaha. They worked on his mechanics, showed him how he was tipping his pitches, and now he isn't. And he comes up. He wasn't even very good in Omaha, folks. He just went out Sunday and went 8 innings and no runs. Best start of the season by any Royals pitcher. Pretty darn amazing as they've won 5 in a row. Chiefs rookies and quarterbacks are in St. Joe at training camp, and players who are coming off an injury are there. It's going to be full bore camp this week. Everybody will be there by Tuesday, and the Chiefs will be full bore as it is on. And I think it's like August 14th is the Chiefs' first game. Does that sound right? That's a Saturday night. I think August 14th is the first preseason game. So we're getting close on that. And it's just kind of fun that the Chiefs are back in camp and we can start thinking about a little football. It's my favorite sport. The Chiefs, obviously everybody's favorite team right now because they're so darn good and so much fun to watch. It's not just that they're good, it's just great entertainment. I mean, spectacular entertainment to watch. And so Mahomes is there. Know this, they have a couple of days where it's $5 to go to camp. Some days they don't. Some days it's $5. There will be no autographs this year at training camp. That's NFL protocol because of COVID-19 you may have heard of. So no autographs at all in camp this year. So I think some fans will be a little disappointed with that, but that is just the way it works. So training camp is here. We also, over the weekend, got another confusing statement from Anthony Fauci, who is now saying vaccinated people need to wear masks. Joe Biden in a town hall last week said vaccinated people don't need to wear masks. They don't know what they're doing, folks. They don't know what they're doing. It's become laughable, and watching reaction on social media is pretty funny because now people are just laughing at everyone. They're like, you're a bunch of dimwits. You don't know what you stand for, right? It's pretty darn funny. And I don't know what Fauci is thinking. I don't know. He's got to go away. I mean, he's just got to go away, or we just got to start ignoring him completely because this thing's all over the map, and we can certainly see that. There are about a dozen Republican lawmakers in D.C. that are calling on Joe Biden to have a cognitive health assessment and release the report to the public. There is a newscaster in Australia that makes a weekly event out of making fun of blasting Joe Biden, that he's not there, that this is the leader of the free world, and we're sitting here in Australia scared to death that this is the guy running America. The world still looks to America. It's all over the place. You can't think this guy is right. It's impossible to think he's right. I don't know what the heck's going on. Is Obama just pulling all the strings from his basement or what? I'm not really sure, but I think it's pretty interesting that the Republicans have said, we want a cognitive assessment of this president and we want it released to the public. Will that happen? I don't see how it can happen because I don't see how he can pass. I don't see how he could possibly do that. If he did it, I mean, he may have done it. They may know what the problem is. They may know. I'm not saying he hasn't, but we don't know if he has, and we don't know the results. If they said publicly, hey, we're going to have this assessment done, then you have to release it. And you can't run that risk because I think we know what the assessment will say. Pretty scary stuff. Truly scary stuff. We'll have more on that coming up later in the week on KKHI, which is brought to you by AmazingGarageFloors.net. John Hutchins is a great patriot. Awesome. Served with honor. He'll seal your driveway with Seal XP for pennies on the dollar of what it would cost to repair your driveway. You can protect your driveway for years. You better believe I'm going to protect my new driveway with Seal XP. And I'm going for the wonderful garage floor from Amazing Garage Floors. 913-901-7139 is the number to call. His name is John. Bstock.net. Chris and the gang have they have the curved TVs in now. Under $500. The big ones, the big curved TVs, those have been a thing in the past that people really like. They still make them. If you've always wanted a curved TV, right now, bstock.net has them for under $500. Online at bstock.net or call 913-800-1419 or visit their showroom at the old Toys R Us building in Olathe, 14680 South Flaming Road. Buck Roofing and Construction, online at rbuckroofing.com. Available 24/7 if you have an emergency. Keep this number in your contacts page so you have it right away when you need it. 913-384-2680, and you'll sleep well knowing Buck Roofing fix the roof over your head. And Dr. Jeremy Fry and his team of orthodontists at Fry Orthodontics, where your smile is just the start. First appointment is free. Our friends, the Higgins, are sending one of their kids to Dr. Fry and his team to get that perfect smile for life. They trust a gentle treatment and a fun experience over something that nobody thinks is going to be fun. They're going to make it as fun as it can possibly be, with fewer appointments, less time missed, less painful, and better hygiene at Fry Orthodontics, online at fryorthodontics.com. And, of course, there's no way we would have reached 1 million downloads in 10 months here at KKHI without the help of the guest, the only guest we're going to have on the 1 millionth download episode of Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. And so many of you know him and have said wonderful things and sent me emails and appreciate the work that he has done doing some weekend podcasts for KKHI. He is my oldest of three. Spencer Kietzman, also known as Junior, living the good life out in the desert, contributing when he can. How you doing, Spence?
I'm doing great, and I certainly appreciate that. I've had a lot of fun doing these. I've gotten to do some interviews with some pretty cool people. Had some good conversations. Obviously, one of my best friends, Alex Charlton, bringing him on, talking about his experience with nursing through COVID and coaching in college football, stuff like that. It's cool, and those are conversations that I would not normally get to have on the air when I'm hosting a show here at 98.7 in Phoenix. So it's just sort of a breath of fresh air to be able to do stuff like that, and that's one of the things that podcasting really opens the doors for you to do, is have conversations that you wouldn't normally get to have.
Well, when I originally came up with the idea of what to do with this podcast, I had the sports and politics part, and then I thought, well, you know what? There's going to be a lot of things that don't fit under those umbrellas, so what do I call it? Mm-hmm. And so I came up with sports, politics, and life, because it's a little lazy, but it's in a way kind of smart, because life can be anything. So anything we want to talk about here, we certainly can, and you've certainly taken advantage of that in some cases. But your passion truly is sports still at this point in your career, and I just can't thank you enough for pitching in and helping out on the weekends. What my goal was to have some weekend programming so that people didn't forget we were there, and it helped create a bridge from what I was doing on Friday to Monday, and it was really, really helpful. And I know you've heard from some of the listeners. I've heard from a lot of them they like you, man. They really appreciate the work that you've done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And obviously, I think Jessica needs to be thanked as well in this because, she's been great helping you out and on the marketing side as well. She's done a great job. And obviously, you wouldn't be able to do this without her contributing as well. But I think with the weekend pods, especially when it's not football season, people are driving to work early Monday morning in Kansas City, and you haven't put out your Monday pod yet, so it gives them something to listen to before you come out with the Fresh Weeks podcast. So that's something I've looked at when I've been recording on the weekends is what are people going to be catching up on Monday morning that they may have missed over the weekend. People have a million things going on over the weekend with kids and sporting events, dance recitals, whatever they have with their family. So they may be missing out, but Monday morning is when, it's back to the grind. They're in their cars, back to listening to Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. And it's been great. And in terms of the name of the podcast, that's the one thing I'll be honest. I was skeptical about the name at first because, you see some of these podcasts and people coming out with content and the names just sound a little bit like too far of a reach. But I think within the first couple of weeks, you had Tim Fitzgerald on one of the Patreon podcasts, and he was raving about the name. He loved it. And that was sort of my validation. Like, okay, this is actually pretty good. When Fitz validates something, I think it's pretty good.
Well, that's pretty kind of you. Tim Fitzgerald, obviously with GoPowerCat.com, and you worked for him while you were in college, and I went to college with Fitz, so we know him very, very well. The name was a hit. I had several names before that, and I had one that I thought I was really going to use, and then this one came aboard late, and it happened while we were sitting around with friends and having a couple of beers, and one of them just said, "Dude, you got issues." And I'm like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do."
Well, we've heard that before.
And I think what I said out loud was, yes, Kevin Kietzman does have issues. And then the light bulb went off, and I went, boom, there it is. And that's the one. And people love it. And if you can't poke fun at yourself a little bit while being serious about these things, then I give up because no human's perfect. We all have issues in our own way. And I thought I'd play on that. And I do want people to know the podcast is about issues. Even if it's sports, It's about issues. I don't want to talk about draft choices or, recruits that people are after, college teams are after. I want it to be about issues. Like the Big 12, Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 is a big issue. But who Kansas is recruiting right now in basketball to me is not a big issue. There's a small number of people that really care about that. So I've always liked issues. I like things that people talk about, and you've tapped into that with what you've done. You kind of understand what the vibe is here and what we're going for, and that's been a pretty cool thing. I've already thanked Jessica, and I've thanked your brother Cameron because he's my tech guy. Cameron takes care of all the tech on this thing, so he's been a big help too. It really is a family affair. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. And the broad spectrum of just issues in general, like the most successful podcasts, in my opinion, are people like yourself who just sort of are open to talking about anything. You don't really want to limit yourself. And unfortunately, sports radio, as you know, you kind of got to be careful because you've got advertisers involved, and your advertisers are great. Most of them, I think, pretty much agree with a lot of the stuff you say. I think they live their lives in similar ways that you do. And that's what's really important is getting a bunch of people involved that have the same ideas or the same, views on how they want to live their life. And it's like, when this first started, obviously there were all the Twitter jokes who, people coming out saying, oh, he's resorting to making a podcast that won't succeed. Well, you know what? That's a bunch of BS because we're sitting here 1 million downloads later. And it's just such a small percentage of people that are actually on Twitter who are negative. Like even in sports radio, I'd say 85% of sports radio listeners on a regular basis, they're not on Twitter. They're not out there chirping on you. It's just a small minority of haters that are the ones that you just kind of got to weed out. And, you've weeded out haters for years. So that was not going to be a problem.
I don't weed them out. I ignore them. So your generation reads that stuff. You read it. I don't. I'm a content provider. I am not a consumer of what comes back at me on Twitter. I will not read it. I do not care. Jessica runs our Facebook page, and that's friendly fire. The people on Facebook want to be there, and they're nice, and that's all good. I still don't like it. I just don't like social media. I'm a broadcaster. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. And if I willfully give out my email address to everyone on the podcast, and I answer every email, and I get tons of emails from listeners, and if haters want to email me, they can email me too. But you know what haters won't do? They won't identify themselves. They won't email you, and they won't call you. They'll lurk in the shadows, and they'll do that. So I don't respect it, and I don't read it, and I don't follow it, and I don't care what they say, because this thing is a winner. And I'm gonna prop you up a little bit, because you've been a big help on this, Spence. You really have, and I think you're going to be doing more here in the coming months. And we're going to expand the programming and offer more options of people to listen to things related to sports and politics, in addition to just me, if you choose to listen to them. So I think I can't give any details on that right now, but here's what I'll tell you. Because I learned this week, and I didn't give details on Thursday. I kind of teased this or mentioned this in a podcast. This is really all I want to say, because I don't want to get in any real trouble, and I really don't want to pick on anyone, and I don't want to be hateful or spiteful. But this month marked 2 years since I've been on sports radio in Kansas City. There are 2 stations in sports radio. After 1 year, sports radio listenership, after 1 year of me being off the air, sports radio listenership was down 25%. After 2 years, it is now half as many listeners. There are stations that literally have, in a month, only 27,000 listeners in Kansas City. It has rock bottomed out with sports radio in this market, and we're at 1 million downloads, and this thing is flying high. And I know, because I've heard from people in the industry, I've not been on 610 as a guest or 810 as a guest, either one. Neither of them will have me on. They now see this as competition. And ultimately, I thank you. I thank, in this order, I thank the listeners first, the sponsors, then we'll get to family. I know that seems backwards, but then we get to family. But man, you should be proud. We've made a dent. We've put a dent into sports radio in Kansas City, and I think that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I'm not really surprised. I knew this was going to be a hit. I didn't know if we would be at 1 million downloads by this time. But you know, I've seen the numbers myself. When I've uploaded podcasts, I've gotten to see just the amount of plays, the amount of unique plays, if you will. So there's new listeners popping up, you know, every week. And that's the important thing, because you're growing your reach a little bit. And as far as you not being guests on 810 or 610, I've actually had a couple guests. One of them is a really good friend of mine. I went to high school with him, and he works at 610. Some of you might be able to figure out who I'm talking about, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't come on. And he sent me a text back saying, you know how it is. I just can't do it. I want to, but I can't.
He couldn't be on with you in Phoenix?
He couldn't be on because he couldn't come on this podcast.
Okay. Oh, as your guest on the podcast. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so he told me no. And I respectfully, said, okay, not a problem. But that's one of the issues, isn't it? When you're limiting where you're going to go on and be a guest, I don't like that. And that's what sports radio has become.
It's the greatest compliment ever. I mean, you have to see it for what it is. It's the greatest compliment ever. Like I know one of the hosts over at 610, and I text him all the time, and I've met for lunch and we've talked, and he's like, dude, I keep running it up the chain. They won't let me have you on, because I'm trying to get on media outlets here and promote the podcast, and they won't. Everybody sees it as competition, and they just won't allow it. And there's also the fact that, as I try to get on TV stations and stuff, there's still a lot of liberalism out there running through it, and they don't really want to have you on if they think you're going to say something conservative. So listen, I've always worn that as a badge of honor. If I'm speaking the truth, if I'm out there connecting with people and reaching people in a way that other media outlets are not, and those media outlets won't allow me on for whatever reason, that's a compliment. That's the greatest compliment ever.
Because you don't need it. You don't need that platform.
Well, I'd love to have it. I'd love to have that platform.
Well, sure.
I'd love to be on there and promote this and reach even more people and get them to listen. But the problem is now everybody sees the thing growing, and they're not going to do it. Like the Kansas City Star wrote all these stories about me 2 years ago, and I've reached out to them, and I've said, listen, an unbelievable follow-up feature story would be, look at this guy now. He was right about Andy Reid's son, and look at this podcast he's doing. How about that follow-up story? Oh, ain't nobody going to do that follow-up story, Spence, because guess what? Kevin Kietzman has issues. Here's the issue he has. He's conservative.
Yeah, and the Star wants no part of that. Absolutely not.
None. All right, buddy. Let's talk a little sports. You're in Phoenix. You got close to the Phoenix Suns. You were crushed that they lost the finals to Milwaukee, weren't you?
Yeah, I was pretty upset, and they did not play well in that series. And Giannis, of course, is a beast, and he might. I tweeted this out. I think he might go on to be the best center in NBA history. I really do. I mean, he's young. He's got 2 MVPs already in a world championship, so that's a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame already. And I think he's pacing at a clip. I mean, the guy's putting up 50 points a night in the finals and multiple nights. It was just unbelievable, and the Suns had absolutely no answer for that. As good as Devin Booker and Chris Paul are, they just couldn't match that. And give Milwaukee credit; they've got 2 really good guards, and Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton and PJ Tucker, for that matter, who defend really well. And they made it a nightmare for the Suns. And Phoenix. The story is Phoenix got up 2-0, and then you lose the series after that. That's called blowing it. I mean, there is literally no way around it. They blew the series. But Milwaukee was the better team. And I think that's the common, most people who understand sports and understand the reality of things will come out and say, Milwaukee is the better team. You got your small percentage who are saying, oh, the refs, and Scott Foster, the head of the officiating crew for the finals, he hates the Suns. He is a joke, whatever. The officiating in the NBA is absolute garbage right now. It is terrible. And I'll be honest, if I wasn't involved with the Phoenix Suns, I don't know that I would have been watching the playoffs this year, because the way that the game is now, with all the flopping, and not to mention every player on the floor complains about every single call. The refs have lost control of the players in this league, and when they're making bad calls and blowing it, essentially, with that going on, it makes it hard to watch. So I don't know where you stand with the NBA right now, Dad, but I'll be honest, if the Suns were not in the finals, I don't know that I would have been watching the playoffs this year.
I'm sort of with you. I thought it was pretty good basketball by and large. I think the NBA has lost the players, period, not just the refs. The players are in charge. They have too much control, and I think that's been the downfall and why not as many people are watching. Now, I've always been a believer, what you said about Giannis is the best of the current era could be, if you just want to get literal about it, he's bigger, faster, stronger than centers from 50 years ago. That's just the way it is. So the same argument would be made that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, we judge these things by championships and rings and stats and things like that. So Giannis has a long way to go. But I guess if you're talking about physically and what he does, maybe he is. So we'll transition to the Chiefs, who most people believe have the best quarterback in the NFL. I thought they were spoiled rotten in the Super Bowl. I thought they were just going to show up and win the thing, and it was going to be easy. And this is Spence's, I'm around him, man. This is a cocky bunch. They think they're just really, really, really good. Is this just a shoe-in? They're going to go out there and win 13 games this year and win the division?
Well, that's never a shoe-in, because you never know what could happen injury-wise. And, Mahomes has missed games in the past, so let's not forget about that. That's the key. If he plays in every game, they've obviously got a great chance and probably will win 13 games. Now, on the other hand, it seems to me like the common theme is everyone is expecting the Chiefs and the Buccaneers to be the 2 best, teams in the AFC and the NFC. Everyone's expecting them to be in the Super Bowl again. Look, Tampa Bay did a great job in the offseason. They got, I think, 21 out of 22 starters back after a Super Bowl win. That's incredible. I mean, who does that? They got everybody to stay. They signed all their guys on defense. They gave out some hometown discounts to get everyone back. So, I mean, yeah, if you're looking at the league as a whole, yes, those are the 2 best teams. Now, the question for me in the AFC is how much better do some of these young quarterbacks like a Justin Herbert get? Like, how much better are they? And can they make a difference, especially since the Chiefs are in the West with the Chargers? That's a team that you look at that if that Herbert kid, really improved this offseason, they could be really good. And you never know with Denver. Their quarterback situation's dicey. We heard all the Aaron Rodgers talk in the offseason. That seems to me like it's sort of coming to an end, and he's not going to be able to get out of Green Bay. There's always that as well. But, I think to me, it's not so much about the Chiefs. It's how much better did anybody else in the AFC, like a Buffalo or like a Tennessee, get in the offseason. And honestly, I don't think that they're quite on that level yet as Kansas City.
All right, and a final sports thought here, and we can't either one of us add any real insight at this point as to what Oklahoma and Texas are going to do, whether they're really going to leave for the SEC or not. There's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of things that would prevent it that are in place, including tens of millions of dollars over the next 4 years because they're still attached to the Big 12. But if it happens, if they were to leave, what do you think happens with the Big 12? What happens with the other conferences? If the Big 12 is down to 8, what do you think would happen?
Well, you're going to first look to expand, right, before the league completely just unravels. And, there's been talk about KU to the Big 10. There's been talk about K-State, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State going over to what would be like the Pac-16, a super conference there. So my first reaction to this whole thing in general was, look, every summer there's all the clickbait talk on all these websites and all these publications about conference realignment. It happens every summer, right around the time of media days. It's clickbait stuff. That's what I thought about this at first. This seems to be a little more serious, though, than in years past. I mean, we remember, 10 years ago when Nebraska, Missouri, and Colorado were in the talks of bouncing, and it seemed like it just wasn't going to happen. There's too many, loops to go through, but it did. And, your tweet, was it yesterday, was great about the teams that have had more success since leaving the Big 12. There's none of them. I think Missouri won the SEC East in their first or second year in the SEC. But after that, I mean, the glory days of the Gary Pinkel days are sort of gone. And Missouri right now is really struggling to put a good football team out there. Not that they haven't had good players. They've put guys in the draft and all that, but they just really haven't been able to compete with the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Floridas and the Auburns and the LSUs. I mean, they're just not there. That's what you want to leave and go to? I mean, go right ahead. Like, what's Texas done in the last 5 years? Nothing. They're going to go to the SEC and compete there? Okay. No. I mean, sure. But it just seems like this, though, is a little bit more serious. Like, this could actually happen.
Oklahoma's example is Nebraska. Nebraska won all these titles in the Big 12, national championships, everything. But they won it out, and since they left, a giant, big, fat zero. What a terrible mistake by Nebraska to leave. And I'm not sure... I think Nebraska fans would love to come back into this conference. I'm not sure the administrators would because everybody's looking for stability, but there's all kinds of options for the 8 schools out there. One that I've seen involves your schools there, Arizona and Arizona State, who feel a little bit left out in the Pac-12. That's a major media market in Phoenix. Colorado's just kind of flailing around in the wind in the Pac-12. BYU, I think, is a real nice nugget sitting out there. The Big 12 could consider Houston to get another Texas team and have really good television ratings in the state of Texas with all those Texas schools. There's a lot of things they could do. I think a lot of what makes sense is maybe the Pac-12 and the Big 12 thinking, let's get together, let's figure something out. I don't know, but it's on the horizon. I think it'll be a big story, not just in the next few weeks, but probably over the next year or two. This is going to take a while.
Yeah, and, in terms of ASU and Arizona, like Arizona's had a lot of success in basketball in the Pac-12. I mean, it's there. They've won the league a bunch in the last decade. I just don't know. Like, I think the Pac-12 is going to do whatever they can to do to keep the Phoenix market in play because, ASU is sitting right here in a city of 5 million people. I don't think they want to lose those eyeballs on their league, and that's sort of what the Pac-12 is. It's not like the Big 12. The Pac-12 is big, major media markets. You've got the Bay Area, you've got Los Angeles, you've got Salt Lake City, you've got Denver, you've got Phoenix. I mean, they've pretty much marketed every big market that there is on the West. They got Seattle as well. I mean, every major market in the western part of the United States. The Pac-12 has, a team there. They're represented. I don't think they would want to lose a city of 5 million people. But again, if ASU and U of A want to bounce to the Big 12, I don't know that the Pac-12 is going to be able to stop that from happening.
Yeah. The question is which league could generate the most revenue, and time zones are everything. If the Big 12 did that, they'd go all the way from Eastern time with West Virginia, Central time with a bulk of this league to some teams in the Mountain Zone. That's what television networks like. They like the flexibility of having an early morning Saturday game on all over the country and then still being able to play late at night on TV. And the Pac-12, unfortunately, has been a late at night driven league where half the country doesn't see their product because they're in bed. So it's pretty interesting what could happen. We'll see how it all unfolds. Mostly, Spence, I just want to thank you for your body of work, the help that you've done here with the podcast, And you've been awesome. A million thanks, I guess is what I would say. A million thank yous, buddy. And I look forward to working with you and having your podcast on as we go forward.
I can't wait. And I know I've taken a few weeks off here. I've transitioned into a new full-time career. So my weekends have been pretty occupied, but once football gets up and going, I'm going to be back, and we're going to have some great content for the weekend podcast. And it's sort of the dog days of summer right now. The Royals aren't really doing a whole lot, so there's not a whole lot of storylines there. But once football gets started and the Chiefs get up and going, I'm going to be back, and I can't wait to contribute more. This is going to be a fun fall.
Thank you, Spence. I really, truly appreciate it. He is Spencer Keitzman. You're going to hear more of him on Kevin Keitzman Has Issues as we go forward. He loves football and he loves sports, so you'll be hearing a whole bunch of that programming. And once again, just in conclusion, thank you so much to everyone who's downloaded or listened to the podcast, all of the incredible sponsors that make the podcast possible, and of course, everyone in my circle, especially my family, that has helped me produce this and teach me how to do this in so many ways and get us to a point where we think we're making a difference and impacting some people. So thank you so much from the bottom of all our hearts and from all of us here in my family to yours. Thanks for listening to Kevin Keitzman Has Issues.
Thanks for listening to Kevin Keitzman Has Issues, presented by Roberts Robinson Chevrolet Buick GMC. To get exclusive patrons-only podcasts, receive a weekly newsletter, and attend in-person patrons-only parties, visit kkhasissues.com and become a patron today. This has been a production of Crooked Tail Media Incorporated.